So the first idea number one, the revival of classical antiquity. Like I said before, classical antiquity, generally speaking, means ancient Greece and Rome. But there was a lot of other ideas where you're talking about ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, and all of that. And we even see this today in the age of the internet, where a lot of people are getting really interested in like what was going on with ancient Egypt, what was going on with ancient Mesopotamia. There was something really profound that was happening there. And clearly there was stuff that they understood then that we don't understand today, because we can't build stuff today like they built back then. There's something missing. This is something that the Renaissance people really got. And so there was this idea of the classical ideals. And we talked before about the transcendentals, goodness, truth, and beauty. That kind of was the main thing that built up the Greek system and built up the Roman system. But now what's happening in the Renaissance, whenever these Greek philosophers are able to bring their knowledge back, whenever Constantinople falls, and all these Greek philosophers are migrating from Constantinople over to the West, and a lot of them are settling in Florence, now these ideas, they're not just applied to the theology of the church. They now are able to be applied to the regular everyday person and applied directly to your human potential in a secular form, to where maybe there's something outside of the church that you wish you could find a way to apply it to your life, but for some reason or another, the church is not able to see that, or the church is not necessarily providing the opportunity for you to apply this to your own human potential. The one area where this was happening the most is the Platonic Academy. This is something that the Medici family, a very prominent banking family, they established this academy called the Platonic Academy. And basically they took a lot of ideas from Plato and other Greek philosophers too, but mainly the ideas from Plato. And they put this all into this school where all of the people who, regardless of your trade, regardless of whatever it is that you were trying to do with your life, you could go there and you could go to this Platonic Academy and you could learn the ideas of Greek philosophy. You could learn these ancient ideas that were forgotten for over 1,000 years. And now you could apply them to your own personal human potential. And this is something that really enabled people to help break free from all of these limitations that society was putting on them, where they were able to look, the information is power. And so now I know I have these ideas of these timeless principles where they've always been relevant. So now I could apply these principles to my life and watch the quality of my life skyrocket, watch the quality of our family's life and our city's life and all of that. The quality of life just starts to really dramatically increase. And this affects basically every area of life, from the culture to the education, the politics, the technology, and just your overall general worldview. The main thing that they really focused on was architecture. Architecture was like the pinnacle of all of the arts combined into one. Architecture was the greatest form of art. And one of the things that happened whenever they started studying the ancient Greece is they also started to be able to be interested in ancient Rome too. So as the families got richer, they would send these rich families would send scholars and archaeologists to Rome, and they would go and let's go find all these ancient Roman texts. Let's go study these ancient Roman buildings too, and let's figure out what exactly they were doing. How did they build such magnificent structures? How did they build such a massive and monumental civilization? And there was one architect above the rest who really influenced the Western view of architecture, the Renaissance view of architecture, more than anybody else. And that was Vitruvius. Vitruvian architecture basically focused on symmetry, geometry, and naturalism, and like a harmony with nature. How to build your house, anywhere from your house to your town hall, to your churches, to your forums, to your cities, how to orient that all to where you use principles of math and geometry and the natural world to build the most effective house, to where it uplifts your soul. And by uplifting the soul, then you also uplift the whole entire civilization around it. So that was an extremely important idea, and we'll get deeper into what exactly the Vitruvian principles were and how he applied them. This will go much more into number 6 and 7 about the food supply, your independence as a family, your independence as a city, and then also your fortifications. And then it'll even go into idea number 8 of having the church at the center. This is something that Vitruvius had. And although in ancient Rome they weren't Christian, they still had temples at the center. And so these ideas that they found through Vitruvius's architecture ideas. I mean, Vitruvius basically designed Rome. I mean, on a large scale, yes, Rome was designed by lots of people, but Vitruvius, among all of the architects, he was regarded as the most prominent, the one who influenced ancient Rome and the architecture the most, and he was the one who influenced then the subsequent chapter of the Renaissance the most too. There was also this idea of republicanism that was coming about at the time, and this was, the idea of republicanism basically means a public affair. So it was no longer like what's good for your particular landlord. It was what's good for the public as a whole. And you get this idea of civic virtue, of an obligation that each citizen has to their particular hometown, and how exactly they're supposed to interact with their hometown and how they're supposed to interact with their homeland in order to apply all of these principles to where it's not just good for your family, but it's good for the society as a whole. Because they didn't disconnect these things. They understood that if it's good for your family, it should be good for the civilization as a whole. And if it's good for your family, but bad for the civilization, then you should probably discard that idea. There was this idea of citizen participation in the government. It was no longer like the peasants had no say in the matter. They were the lower class, especially in Florence, were expected to participate in the government. This is where you get things like debating and voting are reintroduced back into society. And you get this idea of this collective governance. And we'll go into all of these ideas with the subsequent points, because they all kind of overlap and they all kind of lead into each other. Then you get this idea of secular public works and this secular morality, where it's a morality that's applied to that kind of almost branches outside of the church, to where even if you're not necessarily you weren't necessarily a Christian at the time, you were still able to apply these ideas. It showed the benefits and the essences of Christianity, these concepts that were being promoted by the church during the Dark Ages. And it showed, look, that's actually relevant outside the church too. Like, it's not like, oh, these ideas only work within the confines of the church. If you apply these principles, they work regardless. And so then they would be able to fund, because these people were making so much money, these merchants were rising up and they were making so much money, they were able to fund public works like artworks and buildings and town halls and stuff like that outside of the church. And it was no longer like the only thing that was being built was Gothic cathedrals and things like that. But they were able to have, hey, look, this family got really rich. Now we're able to build our own public works, and we're not necessarily reliant on the church to fund everything. We could fund our own things. So this came back into the idea of the civic virtue. Like, you don't rely on somebody else to get the job done. If you are in a position of affluence and you're in a position of wealth, it's your responsibility to contribute to the public as well. And this, one of the major ways that they would do this is to try to have all of the wealthy families help build the city. And that was really expected of you. It's like, if you were wealthy, you were expected to fund it. And if you weren't wealthy, you were expected to contribute some of your work and some of your time, energy, and effort to help building the city. And all of this basically meant everybody who moved to Florence, they had an ambition for progress. They were tired of being held back. And they knew that they were capable of doing something better, and that's what they wanted to do. This is something that I see that's happening in America a lot. People, we just have this idea that there's something more. There's something more than what's going on. We have more potential than what we're actualizing here. We all have this ambition for progress, but we don't exactly know how that progress is played out. Like, what does that look like? How do we actualize our potential? And so by studying how this human potential was actualized in the past, we can get clues of how to actualize it in our present today. So here is, I'll end this section with a quote from a famous orator from ancient Rome. I believe he was a lawyer. He was a public speaker, Cicero. I don't know if you've heard of him before. But this is a famous quote of Cicero about the value of the revival of classical antiquity. He says, "To be ignorant of what occurred before you were born is to remain always a child. For what is the worth of human life unless it is woven into the life of our ancestors by the records of history?" And I think this is extremely important, because what's a child like? A child only knows here and now. They're not that aware of the concept of the future, and they don't really know how they got here. And for an individual person, you really remain in that childlike state, only you're much more disenchanted with the world because you lose that magic. You see, oh my God, I'm caught up in all this mundane. I'm caught up in the day-to-day, all my responsibilities and all my obligations. But the problem is you're this grown-up with this disenchanted worldview, but you have no idea how you got here. And that means you have no idea where you're going. So we're left with this whole entire general civilization that has this disenchanted worldview. We're caught up with the mundane. We can't get past the mundane. We can't get past we can't transcend the day-to-day. We can't find true meaning and value in our lives because we don't understand what happened before us. We don't understand exactly how we got ourselves into the situation we're in the first place. This is so important. If you don't understand how you got to where you're going, where you are, you don't understand how to get out of it and how to get yourself to where you want to be in the future. So that basically summarizes the revival of classical antiquity. Now we could get into the reunification of the East and the West.